it's conveying this really important truth, and that is the work of the day is sufficient, but it is not finished.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. As we take a break from recording, we have chosen to replay several of our greatest hits for you to enjoy. We hope that you are able to gain insight for your educational journey. So, Andrew, have you seen any good movies lately?
No, I haven't.
Is that true?
It's true. I've only seen bad movies.
So a few weeks ago, could have been a few months ago, when we were talking, you had said, we should do a podcast on movies. So today is that day.
Is that day. Well, at least we could recommend a few good movies, since there don't seem to be many in theaters these days. Have you seen any good movies?
Well, probably one that has risen to the top of my list, in the top 5, that's come out recently is The Greatest Showman. I loved that movie. I loved the story. I loved the nod to the history of P.T. Barnum. Mm-hmm. You know, not all of it was exactly true.
No, about 98% of it was not true.
No, I know. But I'm also a huge Hugh Jackman fan.
Oh, yeah.
So if he's singing and dancing, I'm watching it.
I see. Well, I will confess that I have enjoyed watching the knockoffs from the song more than I enjoyed the movie itself. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. Movies get into the culture of people, and songs become earworms, and then people get creative and make variations and play with stuff.
So parodies on The Greatest Showman music.
The best one I've seen is I Am Mom.
Okay.
And it's just this group of moms who do this music video. And, of course, they're changing the words.
Right, from This Is Me
This Is Me to I Am Mom. But it is it's hilarious, and it's a tearjerker. I watched it, and I was at a conference, and they showed it during a break in between. And I started crying because I was thinking of my daughters who have children that look a little bit like those lives. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was a good one.
Yep, busy time. Okay, so no movies that you've seen in the last couple of years. What about, you talked about the Charles Dickens movie. You liked that one.
Yes, The Man Who Invented Christmas. Mm-hmm. At first I didn't know what that movie was, and I thought, well, that sounds a little arrogant. The Man Who Invented Christmas? Who would... didn't like God invent Christmas?
Exactly, right.
But it actually is after a book by the same title, and the book and the movie are entirely different. Mm-hmm. The book is actually a history, and I was so inspired by the movie, I went and listened to the book. But the book is much more a historical, biographical type of book about Charles Dickens, and I learned so much from it. But the movie is about Dickens trying to write A Christmas Carol. And he's got this argument going on with his characters. And the characters kind of have a life of their own, and he can't make them do what he wants them to do to get this book written. He's on this very tight timeline because Christmas is coming, and he's leveraged himself into, if he doesn't get this book out and it's a success, he's on the financial straits. So
like Bob Cratchit.
Yeah, the way the movie – he'd end up like Bob Cratchit. The way the movie is done, though, is the characters actually come into the movie. Only he can see them and talk to them. And, of course, the greatest of them all is Scrooge himself, played by none other than probably close to 90-year-old Christopher Plummer.
Oh, my goodness.
And one of his best roles ever, I think. He just is so
That's saying
perfect
a lot.
in that. Yes, yes. He's one of those actors, I guess, that just, like fine wine, gets better with age. But and so it was just a charming, imaginative film that brought you kind of into Dickens as a human rather than this aloof writer who churned out all these great novels over 100 years ago, which are hard to read for most of us, into, what his life might have actually been like to some degree, and his battle to get past the writer problem that all writers seem to have. That was a good one, yes. The Man Who Invented Christmas, highly recommended.
Good. Good.
Did I mention anything else I ever saw? I mean, if I look at the real memorable movies, I suppose I'd go all the way back to Inception.
Okay.
Did you see Inception?
I did see Inception.
I liked it because this idea of a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream, it is a very imaginative idea that time slows and you hook yourself up to this box where you can share dreams with other people. My son did some research on lucid dreaming, which is the idea where you can actually kind of train yourself to be consciously controlling yourself while you're dreaming. And there's books on this subject, and he did a bunch of research, and there's supposedly techniques you can use to help yourself with this idea. But he said that movie was based on this idea of lucid dreaming, where you can control things inside the dream. I thought just the layering was very interesting. And then I made this comparison one day. So I'm teaching the high school essay intensive. And the SAT essay is a task where the students have to analyze someone else's writing.
Okay.
Right? So they don't – no longer does the SAT want the student to give an opinion about something. They want a student to analyze how someone else expresses an opinion.
Okay.
And it's usually a short, 700, 800-word article. They say it well written, possibly abridged. And so the students are supposed to figure out, okay, how does that author make his case? Is it how is he persuasive? What stylistic elements or logical elements or persuasive elements does he use? And so I thought, okay, so I'm teaching a class about how to write an essay about how someone writes an essay.
Wow, yes.
Now, if I could write an essay about how I teach the class to people on how to write an essay about how someone writes an essay, this would be like the Inception thing,
With three different levels.
The dream within the dream. And I thought, well, that fits. The whole SAT thing is just like a bad dream for a lot of people.
Yeah, I've seen you teach this, and I like how you take what to us is common structural models, stylistic techniques, and apply to looking for those in other people's writing. So that's a clever exercise that kids do well in if have certainly more familiarity with IEW, but still it's possible to learn pretty quickly from your essay.
Yeah, I think we give kids the tools. If they learn stylistic techniques and practice them for a little bit, they can recognize them.
Exactly.
If we help them on including examples and evidence in their writing, then they recognize that when they see it.
Right.
A lot of people read very passively. They just watch the words go by, and you say, well, what did it say? I don't know. That's kind of happens to us too. I mean, haven't you had that experience?
Sure.
You read something and you go off the page and you think, what did I just read?
Right. Well, and those would not be the books that movies are made from, are they?
Probably not, although there have been some pretty bad movies made from decently good books.
Yes.
But I did do this, though you've reminded me of the talk I did one time. I actually did it a few times, called Pedagogy Lessons from Cinema.
Right, yes.
Right? So I looked at different kind of teacher hero movies or movies that taught something about teaching. I really enjoyed that talk. And, of course, we can't record it and sell it because we'd have to go get, copyrights, permissions, and all that. But it was very enjoyable. And so there are some kind of classic teacher movies like
Right.
Goodbye, Mr. Chips,
Okay.
the Browning version, which I didn't know about till another teacher told me, and watched that one. That's about a teacher failure and the lesson of how to not be a bad teacher. And then, of course, one of the ones I think is most powerful isn't really about a teacher, but more a mentor. And that would be Finding Forrester.
Yes.
Do you remember
I like
that one?
movie. Yes.
So Sean Connery plays this elderly Hemingway-esque alcoholic hiding in his apartment in the city.
Spying on the neighborhood.
Spying on the neighborhood. He wrote one book, the greatest American novel, and it's never been out of print, and he's lived off the royalties, but he's this reclusive, curmudgeon-y. He winds up meeting this African-American high school student.
On a dare, I think some kids dared him to go up. And
Oh,
see
is
him.
that how they met? So anyway, he meets him, and they end up developing this relationship, and the old author wants to teach him to write better, or he wants to learn, and so they enter in this mentor-mentee relationship. And one of the rules is what's written in this room stays in this room,
Right.
which is a foreshadowing of the major crisis to come.
Yes.
So anyway, they're sitting there, the two of them kind of in this darkish room. He pulls out these two old typewriters. These were probably typewriters like people had when my grandfather had a typewriter.
Right. No electricity, just pound out the keys.
And so he starts typing away, and the kid isn't doing anything. And he goes, "Start." And he's typing away, and the kid is just sitting there doing nothing. He goes, "Okay." So he goes to a file cabinet, pulls out one story or piece he had written years and years ago for a magazine or something. And he said, "Okay, start typing this. And when you feel ready, go off on your own." So the kid starts typing, and Forrester goes and pours himself another scotch and sits in the easy chair. And the kid's typing, and he shouts at him, "Pound the keys, pound them."
Yes.
And then he falls asleep. Well, the kid gets going, and I think this is something we can all relate to, is that, on demand, think of something, be creative. And so many people fail in that way, which is why, of course, with IEW, we have such success with kids who've had really, in a way, the worst challenges, the worst difficulties with writing when that's the approach. So this underscores the power of imitation.
Right.
And that the master understood this. Unfortunately, the kid liked what he wrote so well, he sneaked in and got it, or took it out somehow, turned it in to school, and was accused of plagiarism. And he was going to lose his scholarship to this, elite school that he was at. And so Forrester gets out and rides his wobbly bicycle down the road, comes out of his apartment hiding
Years of being in a wreck.
for the first time in years, and shows up to defend this kid in front of his teachers that accused him of plagiarism. So it has a happy ending.
And I like the part that cracked me up was when Forrester visits the classroom and they're having a conversation about the book he wrote. And he says, basically, this is a bunch of hogwash. And the professor is quite put out that this visitor would come and criticize his critique of the book. Well, then it turns out that he's the author of the book.
I think his picture's on the wall or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a good one. I'm not sure it's for young children.
Certainly.
But it's
High school and
instructional.
older,
It's instructional for us as mentors of kids in a way. And it's just a good story. And, of course, anything with Sean Connery
Yes.
is almost as good as anything with Christopher Plummer.
Right.
Another of the not really a school teacher hero movie kind of thing, but a movie that stands out for me because I would actually watch this movie any number of times. Probably the movies I would watch again and again and again and again are very few, maybe 5.
Oh, wow.
But this is one of them.
Okay.
and that is Aquila and the Bee.
Yes, I love that movie too.
Oh, boy.
Yep.
And it's such a great character and moral study as well. And I won't go into that because, you want to experience it the first time. And it's Lawrence Fishburne, I believe, plays the old Dr. Laramie, who won the spelling bee when he was 13. And this inner city girl makes it through her school spelling bee kind of reluctantly, and she makes it through the region, and now she's in the national spelling bee. And he agrees to be her coach. And so the relationship between them is beautiful, and it's also got a tragic part and then a healing, a catharsis. But what's so interesting to me was the method of study.
Yes.
And the way all of the kids in the spelling bee kind of would study a little differently, meeting their personality. For her, it was rhythm.
Yep.
And he watched her jump rope, and he said, you lock information to rhythm. So tap when you spell. And so that observation was so interesting, that kinesthetic element that sometimes we, give lip service to, but it's vital in this one. And then, of course, my favorite part is when he teaches her the power of the word roots.
Yes.
Right? And he says if you study the roots, you can spell anything.
Right.
And so he piles up a bunch of dictionaries from different languages and said, here, study this. And just that whole little scene, the way it kind of opens the window on the power of the roots. There's another movie that is not nearly as engaging or dramatic, but it's related. It's pretty old, and it's called Spellbound. It is a documentary about the 1999 National Spelling Bee competition.
1999, Andrew, was not that long ago.
I'm sorry. It is.
Okay. You're right. It's almost 20 years ago. It is 20 years ago.
It's almost a third of our lifetime. I know people who weren't even born in 1999.
Okay, it is true.
But nevertheless, I don't remember when I saw it, probably the early 2000s, somewhere in there. But it was this documentary on the spelling bee, and it followed the lives of several of the kids who made it to the finals from the beginning to the final round. What I can't figure out is how did they know who was going to make it to the final round?
Oh, right.
So how many kids did they actually, film to get 5 that were in the final and get the one who won?
Right.
How could they have projected that? But anyway, in that you also see this wide range of ways in which the kids study. Some of them do, better with visual drill, and some of them do better writing words, and some of them do better with auditory drill, and some of them and then there's the personalities of the parents and all that. So the interesting side effect of us going to that movie, and we saw it one of these kind of, what do you call them, alternative theaters that show films that aren't going to make it into the big AMCs or
like
whatever.
Indie film.
Indie, yeah. So it's like an indie theater. And I took a few of the kids. And when we came home, the least likely of my children said, I want to learn to spell better.
Oh, nice.
So I thought, well, that's a nice effect. But those 2 spelling movies were really, I think, fascinating for me. And even a little bit of those have made their way into my talk, Spelling in the Brain.
Well, and I have to ask you, Spellbound, that the time that you watched that was about the time that you created the Phonetic Zoo. Did one inform the other?
No. It was probably 3 or 4 years after we got the first Phonetic Zoo going. Okay,
so the Phonetic Zoo predated Spellbound
as
far as when you developed it. Okay, that's
right.
Yes,
and I saw Aquila and the Bee and Spellbound probably within a 2 to 3 year period. But examples from those movies made it into my talk, which, of course, people can watch online at our website, Spelling in the Brain. I think it's a very interesting talk. I mean, actually, I think all my talks are interesting. Otherwise, I wouldn't do them.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, Andrew.
So that it was. And then probably one of the best scenes of any movie pertaining to teaching writing that I have seen. And there are many I haven't mentioned. There's, all those teacher hero movies. This is not a teacher hero movie. It's actually a fairly depressing movie wherein Brad Pitt dies. So,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, if you don't want to
You're
see,
supposed to say that ahead
you don't
of time.
want to see that happen, don't watch this movie. But it's A River Runs Through It. It's the biography. It's the autobiography of the American author, literary critic, and professor Norman Maclean. So the scene to watch, and really this 2 minutes of this movie makes buying the thing totally worthwhile.
Okay.
You can watch the 2 minutes and then, just stop, because the rest of it, it's like fly fishing, alcoholism. Like I said, people die. It's kind of depressing. But in the first kind of opening section, there's a very young Norman Maclean, probably 10 years old, I would guess, sitting at his desk writing something. And he brings it into his father, a very taciturn Presbyterian minister who is essentially homeschooling his two sons in the Montana wilderness around the turn of the century, the 1900th century. So he brings it into his father, and his father kind of reads it, marks a few things on it, slides it back across the table to his son and says, again, half as long. So the boy takes it and he goes back to his table and he rewrites it again, brings it in, slides it across the desk to his father. His father reads it, makes a few more marks on it, slides it back and says, again, shorter. So he kind of rolls his eyes, takes the paper, goes back and writes it again and brings it in, slides it across to his father. His father reads it, puts it down, slides it back across and says, good, now throw it away.
Throw it away.
Throw it away. So the boy grabs the paper, crumples it up, throws it in the trash can, grabs his fishing pole, runs out the front door. His mother shouts out the window, Norman, wait for your brother. And then they run off and fly fish, and then the rest of the movie is just not memorable to me at all.
Okay.
But this particular scene, because what is the father teaching this boy?
Brevity.
But beyond that, okay, yes, the brevity, conciseness, all that from a writing idea, but from a growing idea, right? He's saying essentially, your progress today is sufficient, but you are not finished.
Okay.
Right? This is not worth keeping. This in and of itself has no objective value. So throw it away.
Wow.
And we'll do this again tomorrow.
Okay.
And the next day, and the next day, and the next day.
And eventually he became a literary critic and a professor of English.
And quite an author. He wrote a lot more than just his autobiography.
Right.
And so he was molding this young boy in this craft of writing, but he understood what many of us, I think, fail to understand, that it's really all about process. And I sometimes tell that story. I think I tell it in the However Imperfectly talk that is in the DVD in the back of the book. And oftentimes, homeschool moms in particular will kind of cringe when you say throw it away. Like, he rewrote it a third time. That's a borderline miracle in the life of a 10-year-old boy. Throw it away. Can't we just put it in a portfolio and prove that we did something today? That kind of thing. I find it's a beautiful message to the boy. It's a beautiful message to us. it looks a little painful, but it's conveying this really important truth. And that is, like I said, the work of the day is sufficient, but it is not finished. And that's kind of true with everything. I mean, isn't it? Yes. We get into adult life and we start working, or we get into a higher academic area, or we get into a business world, and it's like, we can say we did what we could do today, knowing that it's going to have some improvements. We're going to have to try again, and that's a little bit painful sometimes.
Yep. Well, I'm sorry to say, because I don't think we're quite done yet. I think we have a few more things to talk about, but our timekeeper has told us we need to wrap things up today. So let's call this one part 1.
Okay.
And then next week we can talk about probably a question that's on a lot of listeners' minds. What does Andrew Pudewa think about books versus movies? What do you think?
Oh, I could get into trouble with that.
Well, I look forward to hearing about it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us for one of our favorite episodes. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or you can visit us each week at iew.com/podcast. New recordings will begin airing in January of 2020. Until then, we hope you'll join us each week as we revisit our greatest hits.